So now we're going to talk about JavaScript functions and methods. And here's what you really need to understand about JavaScript functions. All they really are is just like little blocks of code. And you won't really use any of that code until you call it, right? So if you have a JavaScript function that says, show you an apple, well, you're not going to get shown an apple until you actually invoke the name of the JavaScript function. And methods are the same as functions, except methods are created inside an object. And we'll talk about objects later. I think mainly for this particular lesson, let's just talk about JavaScript functions and methods. So there's something you really need to understand when you write a function, is that they also contain parameters. So pieces of information that are passed to a function are known as parameters. So some functions you might want to pass in like width and height if you're going to calculate the value of a wall, and we're going to actually do that later. We'll build a calculator that lets you calculate the width and the height of a wall. And you just want to know that they're parameters. So functions and parameters work together, and later on you might get a little more confused when we start talking about arguments. But for now, functions, parameters. So why don't you go ahead and open up Replit or VS Code, whatever you want to write your JavaScript code in, and however you did it the last time, and then we'll go ahead and practice that. Okay? So if we're recording this with Replit, then in your script.js file, I have written out the function, right? So we did a function, we call it, the name of the function is say hello, and notice we have these two parentheses here, and that denotes a function. We would put our parameters in there if we wanted to, but right now we don't. Then you want to notice these two mustache braces here. And these mustache braces is where you'd separate and say this is where all the code starts and finishes. And then finally, we would put all of our code inside. So in this particular code example, I'm going to ask the user for his or her name, and I'm going to output to the window and say hello. And notice there's a space right here. Now, what is this going to do? Well, nothing so far, because you need a way to invoke and call this function. So in the HTML part, I've written this. We have a button that when they click it, it's going to equal something. And what are we going to do? We're going to invoke the function say hello. And you see that button right there. So if I ran it and I press this button, a JavaScript launches and it's going to ask me, what is your name? And I'm going to say, it's Howard Cam. I'm going to hit OK, and there it is. Hello, Howard Cam. And this is everything that I've told the JavaScript to do. So I've written the function and I've invoked it, and now it's been activated. So why don't we make it a little more complicated for you, all right? So what we're going to do now is design a function that takes the width and the height and multiplies it by something. So whenever you pass in something into a function, that is the parameter, okay? And the values of those parameters are known as arguments. It's a little confusing now, but why don't I code it for you and then we'll talk about it. Or better yet, why don't I just show you some slides, okay? So we can declare functions that need information. So take a look at this. So if I build a function called find area and I give it width and I give it height, and then I output that value of window alert and I go width multiplied by height, well, it's going to give us an area. So I'm passing in two parameters, and the parameters are width and height. And as I said earlier, whenever we give values to parameters, they're called arguments, because you can't do width and height without arguments. You need values. So why don't we look at this code? Okay, so function find area, width, height, those are the two parameters, and I'm going to multiply those two parameters, but we don't have any arguments yet. Remember, arguments are the values of parameters. So we can give arguments as values. We can say find area 3, 5. And if you know the code we're working with, it's going to multiply 3 and it's going to multiply 5 together. And we can also do arguments as variables. We can say the wall height is 10 and the wall width is 3. And we can do it that way. So here's a little challenge that I have for you. See if you can go ahead and make your own function that asks the user what the width and the height is, multiply them together, and then output them to the screen. So I'll tell you what, why don't you pause the video, try to write that code, and then when you unpause the video, I'll go ahead and give you the solution. Okay? I'll see you soon. All right, did you guys figure out the solution? If not, let me show you this solution. So if you look at my code, I've created a function called findArea, and I've passed in two parameters. I passed in W and I've passed in H. Then gone ahead and shown you I've asked the user what the W and the H is. So I've prompted the user enter width and then enter height, and I save it as W and H. And then finally, I multiply these two things together as a window alert. And you say, well, it's not working. Okay, well, did you forget to change and make the button? I bet you guys left it as save name or show all or show name or something, right? So you got to remember that you need to call the function, okay? You're calling the function and you're naming your button. So here we go. I hit findArea, enter width. So let's just say 20. Enter height, 2. So 20 times 2 is 40. There you go. So now you've learned how to pass in parameters, you learn how to write functions, and now you know how to write arguments. Pretty simple, right? Yeah, it's not that hard to do. So before we finish this particular lesson, I want to talk about two things that are really important. I want to talk about global and local variables. Okay, so if you've already done my Python stuff, then you understand what this is. But if you haven't, that's okay. So a local variable are variables that are inside of a function that are part of the function. Meaning, let's take this pen. All right. So this is, if this was a local variable, then this is my pen. Okay. If this was a global variable, then that means anybody can use this pen. All right. So let's think about it like that. All right. So remember, global variables, any function can use it. Local variables, only that particular function can use it. All right. Good. If you have any questions, leave comments below. And if not, I'll see you guys in the next lesson. Bye.